I knew something was wrong the second I saw the chain. Not the gate itself, honestly, because rich people love gates. They put gates around lakes, golf carts, mailbox clusters, probably their own kitchen islands if you let them. But this thing was different. Thick black steel, fresh concrete posts, keypad entry, security cameras angled down like sniper scopes, and right in the middle was a bright white sign that said, Private Resort Access, NO through traffic. And the crazy part? That road wasn't theirs to block. It was my legal access road. My property sat at the very end of that lane. 27 acres my parents bought back in 1976 before anybody in the county even knew how to pronounce the word luxury development. Back then it was just dirt, pine trees, mosquitoes the size of drones, and one old rancher named Earl Maddox who let my folks cross his cattle land through a permanent recorded easement. Simple handshake type people, simple arrangement. Except Earl actually did the paperwork right, which turned out to matter about 40 years later. My parents passed away within 3 years of each other, and I inherited the place, along with an old rental cabin sitting near the creek. Nothing fancy, but peaceful, and honestly I loved it because it still felt untouched by all the fake polished nonsense creeping into the county. Then came Blackstone Horizon Ventures. Yeah, even the name sounded like a corporation designed by a villain in a Netflix series. They bought Earl's old ranch after he died, nearly 200 acres, and within months the bulldozers rolled in. Trees disappeared, hills got flattened, giant stone entry signs appeared overnight, and suddenly there was this ultra-exclusive RV resort called Silver Pines Retreat, built for retirees driving motorhomes worth more than most people's houses. I'm talking marble clubhouse, infinity pool, imported palm trees in rural Tennessee for absolutely no reason. The kind of place where people drink wine beside artificial waterfalls and complain if the golf cart charger takes too long. That's when I met Grant Holloway, project director, mid-40s, expensive haircut, perfect white teeth, wore loafers without socks like he personally invented passive aggression. First time he came to my property, he rolled up in a black Range Rover, so clean it looked allergic to dirt. He smiled the entire time too, which somehow made him feel even slimier. He shook my hand and said, "We're trying to maintain a premium resident experience here, and your easement creates complications." Complications. That's corporate language for, we don't like that you exist. Then he offered me $30,000 to release my easement rights and build a new road somewhere else along the eastern ridge. Sounds reasonable until you actually know the land. That route would have required clearing dense woods, blasting rock, bridging a ravine, and laying nearly 2 miles of gravel road. Minimum cost? Probably 200 grand, and that's before permits. I laughed right in his face. Not dramatically either, just one honest little, "Are you out of your mind?" kind of laugh. His smile tightened immediately. "Our residents are paying for privacy," he said. And I remember leaning against my truck thinking, "Buddy, maybe don't build a luxury resort on top of somebody else's legal access road then." I told him no, politely at first. He kept pushing, started talking like he already owned the outcome. "We're prepared to make this difficult if necessary." That line stuck with me because normal people don't say things like that unless they've spent their entire lives getting their way. A few months passed and construction wrapped up. The resort opened with fireworks, catered events, drone footage online, all the rich people theater. Meanwhile, I drove out one Friday morning to check the rental cabin because my tenant said the water pressure was acting weird, and halfway down the access road, I had to slam on my brakes. There it was. The gate. Locked shut. Fresh tire marks in the concrete. Security cameras blinking red. And standing beside it was some 20-year-old security guard who looked terrified to even make eye contact with me. I told him I lived back there. He shrugged and said, "Management told us nobody except residents can pass." Residents. Like I was trespassing on my own land. I called Grant immediately. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Ignored. Then I noticed something that honestly made my blood boil more than the gate itself. They had paved the road. My easement road. Smooth black asphalt, decorative lanterns, flower beds, little stone curbs. They'd transformed the entire thing into the grand entrance for their millionaire campground while pretending I didn't exist anymore. And standing there staring through that gate, carrying groceries meant for my tenant, I realized these people genuinely believed money had rewritten reality for them. They thought if they built enough luxury around my legal rights, Eventually, I'd just disappear. Now let me pause the story for a second because this right here is where people get manipulated, and honestly, developers count on the average person not understanding how easements work. According to standard procedure, a recorded easement runs with the land, not with personalities, not with ownership changes, not with somebody's fancy rebranding campaign. In plain English, if a legal access easement exists, the new owner inherits the problem whether they like it or not. They don't get to erase it just because their residents paid $500,000 for RVs with heated bathroom floors. And here's where it gets psychological. This is a psychological trap wealthy developers use all the time. They create pressure through appearance and intimidation instead of actual legal strength. Massive gates, security guards, polished branding, lawyers sending aggressive letters. It's theater. They want you to feel small enough to surrender before the case ever reaches court. Because most people panic the moment conflict gets expensive or embarrassing. From a legal perspective, though, blocking someone's only lawful access route is incredibly dangerous territory, especially if the property becomes landlocked. Judges hate that. Like, deeply hate it. Property access rights in the U.S. are treated very seriously because once you start allowing private companies to trap owners out of their own land, the entire foundation of recorded property law starts falling apart. And the wild thing? Guys like Grant usually convince themselves they're the victims. In his mind, I was the inconvenience. I was the outdated obstacle hurting his luxury brand image. That mindset matters because once people start believing their money makes them morally superior, they stop seeing rules as rules. They see them as optional speed bumps for poorer people. The lesson here is, never confuse confidence with legal authority. Some of the most reckless people on earth sound calm while breaking the law. So after standing there at that gate feeling like I'd just been erased from my own property, I finally called my attorney, Rachel Monroe. And Rachel was the exact opposite of Grant Holloway. No fake charm, no corporate buzzwords, no polished developer energy. She talked like somebody who'd been disappointed by humanity enough times to stop pretending. I emailed her the easement documents that night, and less than an hour later she called me back and said, "Oh, this is bad. Not bad for me either. Bad for them." She explained that the easement language was actually stronger than I realized because Earl Maddox had recorded it permanently back in the 70s with utility access included alongside ingress and egress rights. Translation: not only did I have the legal right to use that road forever, but infrastructure connected to that corridor carried legal protections too. Rachel immediately sent Blackstone Horizon Ventures a formal demand letter ordering them to remove the obstruction within 48 hours. And their response? Exactly the kind of smug garbage you'd expect from people who decorate campgrounds with imported Italian stone. Their attorney claimed the easement language was subject to interpretation because the original dirt road had been modernized during redevelopment. Modernized. I swear corporate lawyers can make theft sound like interior decorating. They also argued I could reasonably pursue alternate access options. Alternate access? Through what? A canyon? A forest? Teleportation? My property had no secondary entrance. They knew that. Rachel knew that. The judge would eventually know that too. But while we waited for an emergency injunction hearing, I got stuck living in this ridiculous limbo where I had to park my truck near the county highway and hike nearly 2 miles through wet woods carrying supplies like some guy fleeing civilization after a financial collapse. Every trip made me angrier. Not even because of the inconvenience anymore, because of the disrespect. The sheer arrogance of deciding another human being could simply be pushed off his own land if the aesthetics demanded it. Then something happened that changed the entire case. Honestly, changed everything. I was digging through old paperwork in my father's workshop looking for survey maps when I found this faded utility diagram folded inside an envelope. And suddenly I remembered this random conversation from years ago, my dad explaining how the power company had buried electrical service alongside the easement road because that corridor already had protected access rights. Same with water lines. Same with communication cables. At first I just sat there staring at the map. Then I started laughing. Like actual uncontrollable laughing. Because I realized something Grant and his expensive legal team apparently never bothered checking. Silver Pine's retreat wasn't just crossing my easement road. Their entire luxury resort depended on infrastructure installed within that protected corridor. Every glowing lamp post, every RV hookup, every security gate, every fountain, every clubhouse bathroom with heated tile floors. All of it connected through utility lines tied directly to my easement rights. I called Rachel immediately. There was this long silence on the phone after I explained it. Then she just said, "Oh my God," followed by the kind of laugh attorneys make when they realize opposing counsel has accidentally stepped on a landmine. The next morning, she amended the lawsuit. And suddenly this wasn't just an access dispute anymore. Now it involved utility encroachment, interference with easement rights, potential liability exposure, damages, lost rental income, and unlawful obstruction benefiting commercial operations. In simple terms, Blackstone had transformed a manageable legal disagreement into a catastrophic one through pure arrogance. Rachel contacted the utility companies, and within days engineers started inspecting the site. That's when panic quietly began spreading through the resort management. Funny thing about rich people, they stop acting powerful real fast once engineers and inspectors start showing up carrying clipboards. One utility rep confirmed that the primary electrical feed servicing nearly the entire resort crossed directly through the protected easement corridor. Another confirmed water infrastructure had been installed in the same zone, meaning Blackstone had spent millions developing around legal rights they either ignored or assumed they could bully away later. And honestly, that happens more often than people think. Developers gamble constantly. They assume average landowners won't fight back because litigation is exhausting and expensive. Most of the time they're right. This time they picked the wrong exhausted guy. The hearing happened 3 weeks later, and I'll never forget the atmosphere inside that courtroom. Grant arrived wearing this Navy suit that probably cost more than my truck transmission, flanked by 2 senior attorneys carrying enough paperwork to invade a small country. And even then he still had that expression, that calm superior little smile wealthy men use when they think consequences belong to other people. Rachel barely acknowledged him. She just organized her files and waited. When proceedings started, Blackstone's attorneys launched into this polished presentation about evolving land use conditions, community standards, investment-backed expectations. All these fancy phrases designed to distract from the simple fact they'd locked somebody out of his own property. One attorney actually argued the resort had enhanced the easement corridor through paving and landscaping, as if decorative lanterns somehow canceled constitutional property rights. I glanced over at Rachel during that part, and she looked physically embarrassed for him. Then the judge started asking questions. Simple questions. Dangerous questions. Does the plaintiff possess a recorded permanent easement? Yes. Was access physically obstructed? Yes. Does the defendant currently utilize utility infrastructure located within the disputed easement area? And that's when everything shifted. You could literally feel the room change. One of Blackstone's attorneys hesitated before answering, which is basically courtroom blood in the water. Rachel stood up and introduced the utility maps, inspection reports, photographs of the locked gate, recorded surveys, county filings. Piece by piece she dismantled them. Calmly too. No dramatic TV lawyer nonsense. Just facts lined up like dominoes. Finally, the judge leaned forward and looked directly at Grant. "So let me understand this clearly," he said. "Your company blocked the plaintiff from using a lawful easement while simultaneously relying on that same easement corridor to operate a commercial luxury resort." Dead silence. Grant tried speaking, but the judge cut him off immediately. "Remove the gate within 24 hours, or this court will impose sanctions of $10,000 per day for contempt." And just like that, all the confidence vanished. It was incredible to watch. Guys like Grant build their entire identity around control, around status, around believing they can pressure reality into cooperating with them. But courtrooms don't care about branding packages or luxury amenities. Judges care about documents. And Blackstone's documents were a disaster. The gate came down that same afternoon. Not the next day. Not after negotiations. That afternoon. Workers were out there unbolting steel posts while residents in golf carts watched like they'd just discovered the HOA president got arrested. But Rachel wasn't finished. Not even close. Because once the injunction issue got resolved, the damages phase began. We pursued compensation for interference with access, legal expenses, emotional distress, lost rental income, and misuse connected to the utility infrastructure conflict. Discovery uncovered internal emails too, and wow. Those emails were brutal. One executive literally wrote, "He'll fold eventually once access becomes inconvenient enough." Another referred to me as the holdout owner. Holdout owner. Like I was standing in the way of civilization instead of trying to drive to my own cabin. Those emails destroyed them. From a legal perspective, intent matters. And those messages painted a picture of deliberate pressure tactics rather than an innocent misunderstanding. By the time the final ruling came down, the judge awarded substantial damages, full attorney fees, and a permanent injunction prohibiting Blackstone from ever interfering with my easement again. But honestly, the money wasn't even the satisfying part. The satisfying part came about 2 months later when Grant requested a private meeting. He showed up alone this time. No Range Rover confidence. No polished smile. Just tired eyes and frustration buried under fake professionalism. He offered to buy my property outright for $450,000. Way above market value. Because now my easement sat right in the middle of his pristine luxury fantasy forever. Legally untouchable. Every future investor would see it. Every title review would mention it. Every expansion discussion would circle back to me. He tried sounding respectful during the conversation, but underneath it I could hear the resentment boiling. He still believed I was the problem. And maybe that's the funniest part of this whole story. People like Grant never learn the real lesson. They think losing means they weren't aggressive enough, weren't persuasive enough, weren't ruthless enough. So I looked at him and said, I'm not selling my family's land to the guy who tried to lock me out of it. And for the first time since I met him, he had absolutely nothing to say. Looking back now, the craziest part of this whole thing isn't even the lawsuit. It's how close those people came to getting away with it. Seriously, if I didn't have the original paperwork, if my father hadn't kept old survey maps in dusty boxes, if I'd been too broke or too tired to fight back, Blackstone probably would have won through pure exhaustion alone. And that's the uncomfortable truth nobody likes talking about. A lot of modern property disputes aren't really battles over law. They're battles over endurance. Who gets overwhelmed first? Who gives up first? Who decides conflict isn't worth the stress anymore? That's why developers, HOAs, and corporate property groups often push way past ethical lines before anybody stops them. Because statistically, most people fold. According to standard procedure, legal rights only matter if someone is willing to enforce them. Paper alone doesn't protect you. Action does. And honestly, I think that's why this story hit such a nerve online when friends started sharing it around. People are exhausted watching wealth turn into entitlement everywhere they look. They're tired of seeing powerful organizations act like inconvenience equals ownership. From a legal perspective, easements are supposed to create balance between neighboring landowners, but emotionally, these fights are usually about control. Grant didn't just want privacy for his resort. He wanted a perfect world where inconvenient people disappeared on command. This is a psychological trap successful people fall into constantly. They start believing comfort is the same thing as superiority. The moment somebody disrupts their polished little environment, they treat that person like a defect instead of another human being with rights. And trust me, once you notice that mindset, you'll start seeing it everywhere. HOAs, gated communities, luxury developments, even small-town politics, the language always sounds polite on the surface. Community standards, resident experience, property enhancement. But underneath a lot of it is the same old story humans have repeated forever. People with power convincing themselves rules apply differently to them. The lesson here is simple. Never surrender legal ground just because somebody richer acts confident. Confidence is cheap. Documentation wins. Patience wins. And sometimes the loudest person in the room is secretly standing on the weakest foundation imaginable. So now I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, would you have sold the property at the end? Or would you have kept it out of principle too? Because honestly, part of me still wonders if refusing that money was stubborn pride, but another part of me thinks some victories lose their meaning the second you cash out.